After losing his job, he faced divorce. 5 years later, she returned with an incredible surprise. Jack sat in the dusky twilight on his porch, gripping a cold bottle of beer as shadows stretched over the worn wood. The deep breaths he took echoed against the evening silence of his small town, punctuated only by the laughter of children playing hopscotch nearby. It was a beautiful night, yet the weight of his past loomed like a thundercloud. 5 years since being laid off without warning from the factory. 5 years since everything that mattered turned upside down. Just the thought of Sarah, of what they once shared, sent a shudder through him. He should have been happy now, finding purpose in teaching, nurturing the dreams of his own students like he wished he'd been nurtured. But beneath the surface, desperation festered. Jack pushed back the memories of helplessness when Sarah slipped away, unable to bear the burden of financial despair, a phrase that cut him deeper than any knife. A twinge of resentment mixed with longing twisted in his gut. Was it wrong to wish she could understand the daily grind, the deluge of unpaid bills, and every decision weighed down by a sense of defeat? His mind raced, more chaos than clarity. The ceaseless clanking of machinery seemed a distant memory now, but the sound echoed in his head whenever he closed his eyes. The chaos belonged to another man, a man who had owned his life, defined himself by a job that had vanished overnight. Did he even know who he was anymore? The recognition of failure mixed with a desperate need to provide for his 2 kids, one moment pushing him towards shallow breaths, the next urging him to press onward. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jack reached the climax of his thoughts just as the ringing of the phone shattered the silence. Sarah? His hands went clammy, pulse quickening, the emotion of the past crashing like waves against a rock. 5 years, and now, out of the blue, there she was on the other end of the line. Arriving back in town now felt like a storm breaching a fragile dam. Her voice was the familiar call of an old flame, but what awaited him twisted in knots within his chest. When she appeared at his door, he saw the change etched into her features, the confidence blooming within her. Yet, there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes as she stepped closer, an unspoken apology or the weight of unresolved history. As her revelation began to unfold, Jack's stomach churned. Injustice had brewed beneath the corporate surface he had trusted. The realization seeped into the cracks of their past, mingling with the pain of their separation, a cocktail of hope and agony that left him breathless. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. Could he forgive her for walking away? Did he even know if he wanted to? This moment held promise, yes, but also a haunting reality that threatened to pull them back into dark waters. Jack felt the walls that made sense of his solitude begin to crumble, shifting the very ground beneath him. Behind every tentative word she spoke, he could hear the past echoing, financial ruin, heartache, and the tension of lingering love. And there they stood, the air thick with uncertainty, as a crucial question loomed overhead. Could they reconcile the broken pieces of their lives, or would Sarah's return only unravel the fragile new identity he had painstakingly built? A sense of urgency electrified between them, but Jack could only fearfully peer into the abyss of what could happen next. Jack's breathing quickened, the tightness in his chest making it hard to find the words he wanted to say. As Sarah stood before him, the shadows of their past danced ominously in the dim light, filling the space between them with an electric tension. The memories of missed anniversaries, silent meals, and the painful divorce hung heavy in the air. Each unresolved question pounded against his skull like the throbbing of an unyielding drum. "What brings you back here?" The words fell from his lips, rough and unfiltered, cutting through the frail silence. He didn't expect her to have an easy answer, nor did he crave one. It was the clarity he sought for himself, a reality he desperately needed to face, but had avoided for years. Her gaze dropped to the wooden floor, and he felt the bare honesty of her vulnerability. "I've been thinking about us," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About how I left without looking back. I can't go on ignoring that." Jack could see her hesitance, yet the resonance of her admission triggered a flood of emotions within him, battling in an arena forged by years of hurt and pride. He had spent countless nights trying to convince himself that he was better off without her, that their separation had been a necessary chapter. But now that she stood there, developing a storyline of reconciliation, he felt those carefully constructed defenses begin to crack. "Is this about you, Sarah? Or is it something else? Someone else?" The sharpness of his tone surprised him, but he couldn't suppress the need for clarity. The thought of losing everything once again flared a protective instinct within him, a force that shielded his newfound self from potential chaos. "I can't deny I was lost," she admitted, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I've changed, Jack. I'm not expecting anything from you, just can we talk? Can we explore what's left between us like two people who survived their own tragedies?" Her words docked at the shore of his guarded heart. He hated the way they tugged at his innate need for connection. Could he risk stepping back into a relationship that had collapsed under the weight of financial hardship and emotional neglect? The realization gripped him. He had spent so long building a new identity. It felt like a betrayal to even entertain the idea of letting her back in. But wasn't this the same conversation he had been replaying in his head for years? He thought of his students, how much he cherished inspiring their growth, guiding them through their own challenges. He had discovered a passion for teaching, awakening dreams in them that mirrored a part of him he had thought lost forever. Now, the moment felt pivotal. Perhaps he could inspire something in himself too. Jack straightened up, allowing the urgency of the moment to fuel a newfound determination. "If we're going to do this, we need to set some ground rules," he said, his voice steadier now. "No ghosts, no digging into the past. We only move forward." A hint of surprise flickered in her eyes, mingling with a soft smile. "Agreed. I want to move forward too." As they began to explore their fears and hopes, Jack realized he stood at a crossroads, balance on the brink of renewal or retreat into the familiar comfort of solitude. The weight slipped from his shoulders, not from resolution but from the dawning revelation that perhaps facing Sarah was not about recreating the past, but constructing a new future. Yet, as the conversation became more profound, doubts crept back in, whispering that the battlefield of their history would not be easily shaken off. She had returned with purpose, but questions remained. Was it genuine, or just a facade wrapped in nostalgia? Jack felt the distant call of temptation tugging at him, enticing him to break free of his hesitations. The stakes escalated as the past interwove with their tentative present. "Can we trust each other again, even after everything?" He posed, voice laden with the weight of his vulnerability. "What if this time we wrote our own story?" She replied, the spark of possibility igniting the air between them. But the lingering question was whether Jack was ready to risk it all once more. As he searched her face for the answers, he knew that the most perilous decision of his life lay ahead. He was about to confront shadows, but what ultimatum awaited him in the light of their choice? Jack sat across from Sarah, his heart still racing from the weight of their conversation. The initial discomfort of vulnerability began to morph into something else in anticipation, a flicker of hope mingled with dread. He had strived for independence after the divorce, cobbling together a life where he was no longer defined by the remnants of their shared past. "You really want to move forward?" Jack asked, eyes narrowing slightly. "You understand what that means, right? It's not just about playing house again. We're not the same people we used to be." His tone was firm, infused with a protective instinct. The walls he had built around his heart loomed high, and he wished to dismantle them only if it would not lead to more pain. "Of course I realize that," Sarah said, her composure gaining strength. "But I believe in second chances. I've spent years reflecting on my mistakes, and I want to be honest with you." Each word dripped with sincerity, and the rawness of her emotion made it harder for him to remain steadfast. Jack could already feel the familiar pang of his fear rising, constricting his chest. Trust was not just a word, it was a battleground, strewn with the remnants of past betrayals and wounds. Honesty is a loaded term, especially for us. What is to say this isn't just an escape for you? An urge to relive some fantasy? Her eyes met his unflinchingly. What I'm offering is an opportunity for both of us, a chance to take what we've learned and mold it into something new. I'm not asking for a fairy tale. There was courage in her voice. Jack recognized it as a reflection of his own tumultuous journey. Teaching had introduced him to resilience, both in himself and in his students. He had seen kids rise from ashes, displaying a tenacity he scarcely thought possible. Perhaps that potential existed in his own relationship, as twisted and frayed as it might be. What did you want to discuss? Jack inquired, steeling himself. If they were walking this path, he needed to confront their shared history not as a means to blame, but to understand and find closure. Sarah took a deep breath before speaking, the weight of her confession palpable. For years, I've struggled with the loneliness of my choices. I realize I walked away, but I also never fully faced how I hurt you. I think we owe it to ourselves to unpack that. The air shifted, the intensity of her honesty prompting Jack to lower his defenses slightly. He respected her willingness to confront the past. It was something he had evaded for far too long. Then let's name those shadows, he suggested. What did I mean to you back then, and what do I mean to you now? I never stopped caring, she replied. But I got lost in my own worlds, the pressure, the demands of career and life. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to balance it all. But I've changed. I prioritize connection now. Jack weighed her words, feeling layers of disbelief intertwine with a flicker of hope inside him. It was dangerous territory, but perhaps there was fire still glowing beneath the ash. We'll go back and forth like this, questions, answers. I don't know if I can fully embrace what you're offering, but I'm willing to explore. The notion of exploration ignited something within him. It stirred ambition, akin to the excitement he felt stepping into a classroom filled with young minds eager to learn. Perhaps this was the same possibility, asking questions about the shades of their past together, reaching for clarity that could create a brighter chapter. As they delved deeper into those conversations, Jack felt his resolve intensifying, but apprehension persisted. The shadows of their past had not been easily extinguished, and self-doubt hung over him like a dark cloud. Was he setting himself up for heartbreak again, or could they truly write a new story? Even as hope glimmered softly ahead, Jack understood that vulnerability came at a high price. He had built a life on trust, and this could either reinforce his journey or unravel it altogether. What resided in the depths of their conversation remained dynamic, full of potential and peril. With a new sense of determination and the pressing weight of decisions looming ahead, Jack knew the next turn would demand everything from him. So if we rebuild, Jack began cautiously, what does that look like day to day? How do we know we want to slip back into our past? The answer rested in their hands, but the question posed triggered a seismic shift within him. They were on the threshold of change, but could they pull it off while carrying the legacy of their history? As they dove into that dialogue, an unshakable conviction emerged: there was no easy road ahead. What awaited Jack at the end of this uncertain path, however, remained enigmatic and knotted. Was he finally ready to face the deep-seated scars, or would he allow history to define him yet again? His inner conflict became palpably present, hovering like a dagger, ready to cut open old wounds that had yet to heal. Jack's mind buzzed with conflicting thoughts as he navigated the implications of Sarah's words. Each exchange they had felt like pulling the threads of their past into the light, exposing the intricate patterns they had woven together, and now, the very fabric teetered at the brink of unraveling. He felt the weight of responsibility not only to himself, but also to the shared history that was painfully etched in their hearts. Day to day, it might mean setting new boundaries, Sarah offered, a flicker of hope reflected in her eyes. We cannot ignore our past, but we need to build a present that feels safe. We'll have to be honest about our needs. Her voice steadied Jack. It spoke of courage, yet it demanded risk. Boundaries, Jack echoed, digesting the prospect. The words struck a chord. In his career, he had often reminded his students of their importance, yet he seldom enacted them in his own life. The boundaries with Sarah had once been erased in the thick of both love and resentment, but perhaps they were his shield. If he were to embrace a new path with her, he'd also have to confront what it meant to protect himself. What would those boundaries look like? He asked, curiosity mingling with his caution. He watched as Sarah thought deeply, her brow slightly furrowing, revealing the complexity of the question. I think it starts with open communication, she began, her voice soft yet resolute. We could establish set times to talk about our history and how we feel about it. Creating space for feelings without assumptions or reactions initially might keep the anger at bay. Jack nodded slowly, the gears turning in his mind. He prided himself on being a good listener, a guiding light for his students, but could he apply that empathy in his relationship with Sarah? He felt a unique tension, one that pulled at his insecurities. What if I slip? What if I can't separate my past fears from our present? We acknowledge the slip-ups, Sarah replied gently. This is a process, Jack. Growth isn't linear, it's full of ups and downs. We can rely on each other to navigate those moments. Isn't that the purpose of reconnecting? Jack felt the tension in his chest lessen as he considered her words. Her approach of treating their relationship as a collaborative project reignited his capacity for empathy, something he desperately needed to allow back into his life. Before the divorce, he had forgotten that love required balance, not just sacrifices on one side. Perhaps they could redefine their connection. As their conversation deepened, Jack ventured into territory he'd avoided. I've seen resilience in my students, but I wonder if I have the same ability to overcome setbacks. What if every misstep reinforces my fear instead of erasing it? For a moment, silence enveloped them. The air shifted, thick with shared vulnerability. Jack's admission hung between them, raw, exposed. Could he truly believe he was worthy of growth after all he had endured? Furthermore, could he let Sarah in without the weight of his past baggage crushing him? I believe you do have that resilience, she said quietly. You might not see how far you've come, but you've built a life that reflects your strength. In education, you teach your students to embrace their potential. It's time you taught yourself the same lesson. A spark ignited inside Jack. He felt a stirring awareness, the realization that resilience didn't merely reside in others, but within him as well. The joy of teaching was rediscovered in this very moment, an affirmation of personal capacity intertwined with responsibility. He envisioned creating a relationship that was not just a revival but rebirth. He leaned forward, heart racing. If we're doing this, I'm ready to face my fears, but I need to know everything. Her eyes widened, revealing excitement laced with fear. Everything? Yes, everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. There was an edge of urgency in Jack's voice, the fear of allowing shadows of their past to dictate their future. Could honesty serve as the balm to their wounds? As Jack and Sarah prepared to engage, in the raw dialogue that awaited them, he understood that this moment could serve as the catalyst for true personal growth. As they delved into the depths of vulnerability and confrontation, Jack knew he was on the verge of an evolution that could bring liberation or despair. Are you ready to uncover the truths we've buried? Sarah's question resonated with unyielding intensity, pushing Jack to the precipice of his self-discovery. With each heartbeat, he grappled with the decision: what if what was waiting for him, beneath the surface, was more painful than he anticipated? In his pursuit of honesty, would he instead find an abyss? As he steeled himself for this next chapter, the future loomed before him, unfurling possibilities he could hardly fathom. The air in Jack's office felt charged, almost electric, as he braced himself for the conversation that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of his life with Sarah. With their agreement hanging in the balance, he focused on breathing steadily, anchoring himself amidst the swirling emotions. He could feel the weight of every untold truth pressing against him, yet there was a burgeoning resolve to uncover those buried sentiments. Okay, Jack said, forcing his voice to remain steady. I'll go first. His heart thudded in his chest, a rhythmic reminder of both his vulnerability and determination. I've carried a lot of fear of failure, of not being enough. It's what fueled our disagreements, why I started to build walls instead of bridges. He watched Sarah's expression transform, the empathy in her eyes compelling him to continue. I didn't want to be a liability, yet in trying to be strong, I became emotionally distant and, at times, cruel. Her silence felt safe, but daunting as he awaited her response. His confession hung heavily between them, raw and open. Would she see him as he was, not just as the man who faltered, but as someone willing to grow? I appreciate your honesty, she finally replied, nodding slowly. That's a huge step, Jack. Her warmth sparked a liking inside him, a thirst for more unearthing. In that moment, he realized they were both architects of their reunion, laying bricks of trust deeper than they had built previously. But the price of this new structure would be honesty, a devotion to unveil past grievances and feelings that had long been neglected. Encouraged, Jack continued, I've also come to understand that teaching has always been a part of my identity. When I lost my job, I felt like a part of myself was stripped away. I equated my worth with my accomplishments. The pressure to succeed consumed me. He took a breath, the weight of these confessions feeling both liberating and terrifying. Without that validation, I spiraled. I shut out everyone, especially you. That's what I feared, Sarah admitted, her voice trembling slightly. That in your silence, you'd also silence me. I didn't know how to reach you. Memories rushed back to Jack, of the late nights where silence filled their home, eroding the connections tethering them together. It was in those shadows that resentment festered, giving birth to distance. I didn't mean to push you away, Jack said, his honesty like a spring of hope. I thought I was protecting us both, but I see now that I was only isolating us. I pushed you into that isolation, too, she countered, surprising him. My expectations became walls instead of paths. I wanted us to fit a mold of success that I thought was necessary, but it was suffocating. Her eyes glistened with vulnerability, a reflection of his own. The realization of mutual complicity in their disarray pierced through Jack's heart. It was a moment of revelation where both their truths intertwined as one narrative, a narrative sprawling across their shared history. Okay, Jack whispered, the admission hanging delicately between them. Where do we go from here? Sarah considered him, her steady gaze unyielding. We embrace our past, with its flaws and failures. Then, we find a way to move forward together. We redefine success, not as an external benchmark but an evolving personal journey. But we have to promise to keep talking, even when it gets uncomfortable. Jack nodded, the primordial agreement igniting a surge of purpose in him. For the first time in years, instead of feeling the weight of expectation, he felt the lightness of possibility. Changing the narrative of their story could lead to healing, but it would demand relentless honesty. As they exchanged a new understanding, Jack's mind raced with a startling thought. What if their journey toward personal growth and mutual support could become a catalyst, not just for their relationship, but also for his professional life? What if, through this reinvigorated bond, they could rediscover the resilience he feared he lost? That glimmer of a shared future with Sarah felt like a flame, warm and inviting, yet it flickered with uncertainty. There was still so much to explore. Are we ready to face the deepest wounds? He asked, the weight of both their futures now intertwined. With a flicker of apprehension shadowing her features, Sarah smiled faintly, only if we do it together. That promise resonated in the air, yet it brought with it a thunderous challenge. The next step loomed like a darkened doorway that could either lead them to redemption or further towards despair. Jack felt the urgent pulse of his journey intensifying as he prepared to confront what lay ahead. What had they hidden, and what new truths awaited in the shadows? The walls of their past still echoed with unanswered questions. The incessant chirping of birds outside was a stark contrast to the silence that cocooned Jack and Sarah. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space between them, yet the warmth felt distant as they prepared to unearth uncomfortable truths. Jack's gaze was drawn to the delicate patterns of light created by the sun filtering through the leaves. He could almost feel his pulse synchronizing with the rhythm of nature, an echo of life's inevitability and resilience. But it wasn't just a matter of sunlight and shadows, it held the weight of every secret they had buried. Okay, then, Jack began, forcing a steadiness into his voice. We need to talk about what got us here. What we haven't said or faced. The air thickened with tension as he braced himself to dig deeper. I have to acknowledge that for so long, I rooted my self-worth in what I achieved professionally. When I lost my job, it stripped away the foundation I thought my life was built upon. I didn't know how to reconcile that loss with who I was supposed to be. I thought I could just work through it. But now I realize I can't recover from it alone. I need you. His vulnerability hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Sarah's reaction was almost imperceptible, a slight twitch of her brow, but the acknowledgement of his need resonated with an unspoken understanding that both had craved. I also realize, he continued, I've been more concerned about putting on a brave face than reaching out for help. I built my identity around being the strong one and neglected the part of myself that required connection. He took a breath, allowing the weight of the confession to settle in. I thought by being the provider, I could shield us from uncertainty. But I see now that it only created a facade. I need to be more than a role. Sarah leaned in, an intensity flickering in her eyes. And I need to be honest about how I coped with your silence. I believed that pushing you to succeed would keep us afloat. My expectations became a driving force, but instead of motivating you, they weighed you down. I see that now. She hesitated, grappling with her choices. I didn't realize at the time that my fierce determination to mold our lives a certain way was ultimately stifling to you. I thought I was being supportive, but where did that leave our partnership? Jack let the words sink in. The exchange felt like chiseling away at the stone walls of their past. They were revealed in pieces, fragments of hurt that together formed a narrative neither had anticipated. Maybe, he said, serving as his own moral compass, coming back to what truly matters means letting go of the scripted roles we held onto so tightly. We need to redefine everything. Then let us do that together, Sarah urged, her vulnerability now surfacing as well. But even as she spoke, Jack noticed a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a silent question whether they could really take the leap into an unknown future. But where do we start? Jack answered, his voice firm but earnest, by reclaiming what we've lost. We begin by recognizing our value isn't tied to professional success or societal expectations. It's rooted in who we are and how we choose to grow, individually and side by side. In this moment, a new resolve sparked within him. He wasn't merely an educator, he was a learner, a craftsman of his life. Perhaps he could explore new avenues in sharing what he had learned about resilience, in drop-in workshops for those facing occupational upheaval. There had to be a way to pull others from the trenches just as he was now pulling himself from his own. But the daunting shadow remained. The complexities of their past were not easily erased, and he could sense the weight of what had been left unsaid still loomed. What other emotional remnants would surface? As he considered the implications of what they were attempting, anxiety gripped his chest. They were on the brink of something transformative, yet it reeked of the unknown. Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. Will you promise me, not just for today, but moving forward, that we'll confront these shadows together? No walls, only bridges. Always, he vowed, conviction surging through him. Yet, as he looked into her eyes, he couldn't shake the foreboding sense that their journey was only beginning. There were numerous paths before them, demanding courage and resilience, but the shadows still lingered, threatening to overshadow the very foundations they sought to rebuild. What secrets lay beneath the surface of their past, waiting to be unearthed? As the sun moved across the sky, a flicker of doubt crept in. Was it truly possible to redefine their lives in a space where so much hurt had flourished? As dawn broke on another day marked by uncertainty, Jack felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. The whispering breeze carried with it a sense of promise, urging him to embrace the opportunity for change. He stepped outside, the morning air cool against his skin, grounding him in reality. The world was already bustling, a vivid contrast to the internal struggles that loomed over him and Sarah. With each passing day, he felt a growing compulsion to channel his experiences into something constructive. His mind raced with possibilities, mentorship, workshops, perhaps even a blog chronicling his journey. The words began to form in his thoughts, as if crafting a lifeline for others currently navigating their personal storms. He paced in the yard, the grass beneath his feet a comforting constant amid the swirling chaos of his mind. But as he considered these ideas, doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. Was he really capable of guiding others when his own life felt precarious? The shadow of his recent job loss loomed large. What authority did he have to speak on resilience? Jack found himself wrestling with this unsettling introspection. There was a thin line between vulnerability and exposure, and he feared the latter would only amplify the doubts he harbored. "Focus," he muttered to himself, shaking off the indecision. He recalled their conversation the previous day, the unearthing of truths they had both buried. They were standing at the precipice of a new beginning, one that demanded courage and clarity. The familiarity of his teaching background tugged at him. He had always been a guide for his students, helping them navigate the complexities of their own lives. Maybe he should return to that role, not just in the classroom but in a broader sense. But as he walked through the neighborhood, he felt an inexplicable barrier. People smiled and waved, but the struggle within him felt isolating. Navigating this journey was his responsibility alone, wasn't it? Sarah's support was unwavering, yet the fear of letting her down juxtaposed with the desire to reclaim his identity was paralyzing. Jack paused at a small park, watching children play. Their laughter was uninhibited, yet they were oblivious to the struggles that defined adulthood. A pang of nostalgia hit him. Those carefree days felt irretrievably distant, yet the desire to connect with that joy, transforming it into something meaningful, felt urgent. He noticed the park benches, worn but welcoming, and an idea began to sprout. Could these benches serve as an informal gathering space? What if he set up casual meetups with people like him, those struggling with their identities post-career changes? It would be a place to share experiences, foster connections, and, perhaps, build a community of resilience. With each step home, the idea crystallized. The fear of inadequacy began to subside, replaced by a flicker of hope. He put together an outline for his first informal session, drafting potential topics like finding strength in vulnerability or redefining success. He could share his story, not as an expert, but as a fellow traveler in their shared struggle, a beacon in the fog. Later that evening, Jack approached Sarah with his plan, excitement in his voice. "What if we set up a series of discussions at the park? I could facilitate them under the oak tree where the kids play." Her expression shifted from curious to tentative. "Are you sure that's where you want to invest your energy? It's a big step." His answer came unbidden, the words flowing. "I need to do this, not just for others but for myself. It's about rediscovering a purpose, and I can't wait for someone else to place that opportunity in front of me." As he spoke, the realization struck. This venture was more than just a plan. It was a decisive move into a larger identity, one grounded in authenticity. The path to reclaiming his self-worth was intertwined with how he helped others find theirs. Yet, beneath the excitement lay an undercurrent of fear. What if no one showed up? What if they were met with indifference instead of the community he hoped to cultivate? Deep down, he knew that every risk included the possibility of failure. The ghosts of his past whispered doubts. Would he waver when faced with those very real threats? Jack took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay grounded in the moment. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting hues of orange and purple across the sky, reminders that endings were merely prelude to new beginnings. But as he contemplated the next steps, one nagging question remained. How would he handle not just the public conversations, but the inevitable tide of personal reflection that this journey would demand? The roles he'd once clung to were shifting into unknown territories, a transformation that promised growth but also peril. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, the weight of the day felt palpable. Jack stood at the threshold of possibility, poised to step into something authentic, yet he couldn't shake the apprehension of what lay beyond the dark. Would he find the light waiting for him on the other side, or was he simply walking into another shadow? The following day dawned bright and clear, but Jack felt the pressure of uncertainty pressing down on him like an unwanted weight. As he brewed his morning coffee, the familiar scent filled his kitchen, yet the joy it once brought was muted, overshadowed by his feelings of inadequacy. With a meeting planned for that afternoon, he wrestled with the fear of vulnerability, exposing his truth to a crowd of potentially judgmental eyes. He sat at his kitchen table, jotting down notes for his first session beneath the oak tree. The titles danced before him, but they felt insufficient. Finding strength in vulnerability began to morph into something heavier. The cost of courage seemed more fitting, reflecting the dread he felt around opening up to a world that had cast him aside. Did he have anything worthwhile to offer? He furiously scribbled a list of his experiences, successes, and defeats to feed his confidence, but with each line, doubt licked at the edges of his resolve. As noon approached, the nerves bubbled. What if he found himself trapped in silence, fumbling over words? He could almost feel the oppressive gaze of disinterest lingering, eviscerating his intention. Yet, a tiny voice, a reminder of the resilient spirit that brought him here, pushed back. This is a thread toward healing, Jack. Not just for them, but for you. Visibly shaken, but steadying himself, he threw on a casual shirt, wanting to appear approachable yet professional. As he moved through his routine, he thought about the conversations he'd had with Sarah, her insistence that he was never far from being the steady rock they needed. She had taught him that courage does not dwell solely on victory. Sometimes it thrives in articulating the experience of being human. Finally, with gathering resolve, he stepped out onto the path toward the park. Each stride, once laden with doubt, felt lighter, almost buoyant amid the rustling trees. He passed rambling conversations and men pushing baby strollers, a slice of life that seemed vibrant yet distant. How was it that everyone else appeared so collected while he was fraying at the seams? As he reached the oak tree, the aged branches casting shadows on the grass, Jack paused. This could be a sanctuary, a haven not just for sharing but for discovery. Extending his last-minute thoughts to the grassy expanse, he envisioned the faces, undiscerning, curious, open as cohorts on a parallel journey. With each mental image, his confidence surged a notch higher. He could provide clarity to those grappling with their own identities. He could model the courage he sought. But just as he was losing himself in those possibilities, a sharp voice interrupted his reverie. You should be worried about your own struggles before you try to fix someone else's, Jack. It was Ben, a former colleague, perspiring from a jog, stopping unexpectedly at the side of the path. The skepticism in Ben's tone felt like a cold wind cutting through the warmth of Jack's ambition. That's not what this is about, Jack replied, tempering the defensiveness swelling in him. It's about connection, sharing experiences. We all have battles, Ben. I merely want to create space for that. Ben smirked, eyeing Jack's setup. Good luck with that. Just remember, you don't know everyone's story. They may not want your insights at all. With that statement, he resumed his run, leaving Jack standing in a swirl of both determination and doubt. A knot began to twist in Jack's stomach. The vulnerability he felt suddenly amplified. The fragility of connections mirrored his internal landscape, uncertain yet laced with potential. Could he capture their attention? What if they saw through him the second he began to speak? The threat of judgment loomed like a storm on the horizon. As chatter filled the air and the clock edged closer to start time, Jack began arranging chairs in a circle. Each placement seemed symbolic, a commitment to openness and dialogue. But beneath each installation lurked a question that refused to settle. Would anyone even show up to fill those chairs? In a world where vulnerability often mingled with skepticism, could he truly find power in his story, or was this merely a mirage? Jack inhaled, centering himself as he prepared for what could very well be a reckoning not just among those who might gather, but within himself. With the first few attendees appearing along the path, a rush of conflicting emotions surged through him. Instinctively, he knew he was standing on the precipice of something that could redefine him if only he could find the courage to leap into the unknown. But as the sun slid lower, casting a long shadow over him, one question persisted. Would he have the strength to embrace the very vulnerability he wished to inspire? As the final minutes slipped away, Jack tightened his grip on the wooden back of the chair, heart pounding in his chest. Faces began to fill the circle, distinct yet blurred in his peripheral vision. He recognized a few, a neighbor, a distant acquaintance, yet the majority were strangers. The unease settled in his abdomen, an unwelcome companion. They were here, and with their presence, he experienced both a surge of hope and an acute awareness of his inadequacies. Each person settled into their seat, adjusting themselves in the fading light as the sun dipped further behind the horizon. Jack cleared his throat, his mind racing through the countless worries that flooded him. Had he prepared enough? Would everyone understand what he needed to convey? He wanted to guide them through their own labyrinths, yet he felt woefully lost in his. He took a deep breath, attempting to calm the storm within. In his chest arose a flicker of the very strength he sought to embody. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about perfection, but about the rawness of shared experiences. Perhaps talking openly about past failures, about falling apart and picking up the pieces, could create a bridge toward healing. "Thank you all for being here," Jack started, his voice quavering slightly. The circle of eyes, keen and waiting, made him feel small but not insignificant. "Today isn't about me lecturing. It's about sharing. I want to know you, and I want you to know me." Those words, simple yet profound, formed the bedrock for what could unfold. He felt a few heads nodding. There was an openness they carried that encouraged him. As he spoke about the challenges he had faced, his job loss, the messy threads of divorce, he allowed the vulnerability to wash over him. He shared snippets of his experience, each revelation liberating yet daunting. He didn't shy away from the pain, the isolation, or the dwindling faith in his own abilities. Each story unlocked a small part of him, and in doing so, he discovered a new layer of power. A few moments into his discourse, an unexpected thing happened. One attendee, a woman with bright eyes and a hesitant smile, raised her hand. "Can I share?" Her voice trembled with uncertainty. "I've been battling my own demons too." The whisper of the words sparked a change. When she shared her own story of loss and reawakening, something shifted in Jack. This was the connection he longed for, the realization that they were all grappling with their narratives, seeking solace and understanding. As stories exchanged, the collective energy surged. Jack, who began with crippling doubt, now marveled at the empathetic currents flowing among them. Questions emerged, laughter mingled with tears, and as they shared, a profound sense of purpose ignited within him. They were not just attendees, but contributors to a shared experience, each voice amplifying their collective resilience. Yet, with the warmth of camaraderie came flickers of familiar fear, the doubt that this moment might be fleeting. What would happen after this gathering? Jack felt the tension of potential misunderstanding creeping in as he glanced at some faces still shrouded in skepticism. Would they return? Would they trust him enough with their stories again? As he closed the session, thanking everyone for their vulnerability, Jack felt the weight shift ever so slightly. The space they created together felt sacred, alive with possibility. Yet, as he collected his notes, the urgent question loomed larger. What if this was merely the beginning of his journey, and he had yet to uncover the deeper layers of his own healing? A thought clutched at him, a whisper amidst the growing silence as people began to rise and disperse. What if he had the capacity to transform that newfound connection into something profoundly influential, not just for them but for himself? His heart raced again, not with fear but with the exhilarating prospect of what lay ahead. The path he wished to forge was still in the fog, but a voice within urged him to embrace it. Was he ready to face the deeper truths he had yet to uncover about himself in this journey? As he stepped away from the circle, he realized that the work was just beginning. What he didn't know about his own story could change everything. The real challenge was not finding his strength, but in fully understanding his own vulnerability. Jack stood in his office, now more akin to a sanctuary of growth than a place of strife. The clutter around him had transformed into a canvas of his journey. Pictures from his first workshops hung proudly next to notes scrawled with ideas for future sessions. Each line of ink spoke of resilience, a testament to the battles he had fought and the friends he had gained in this newfound mission to empower others. After that first gathering under the oak tree, momentum had surged. Attendees returned, bringing their friends, and an unexpected community formed, each person eager to share their stories of struggle, regret, and triumph. Jack observed their interactions, noting the healing that came with collective honesty. What had started as an exploration of his own darkness had illuminated paths for many, transforming the once lonely journey into a shared experience of upliftment. Jack reflected on his own evolution, how he had gone from a man encased in failure, clinging to the remnants of a prior life, to someone who embraced vulnerability as a strength. Education and mentorship had become more than just professions. They flourished into a calling. The fear that once stifled him now fueled his commitment to help others confront their own challenges. One evening, as he prepared to moderate a discussion titled Embracing Change, the Power of Letting Go, it struck him that he had finally learned to let go of the narrative that tethered him to his past failures. He no longer cringed at the thought of recounting his job loss or his divorce. Instead, he spoke of them with a confidence that resonated authenticity. They were chapters in his life, not descriptions of his worth. As he faced the group, now familiar and welcoming, Jack was filled with a different kind of urgency, the kind that accompanied fulfillment. Tonight is about exploring how the winds of change can push us forward, even when they feel unsettling, he began, his voice steady. I stand before you not just as a facilitator, but as someone who has walked through his own storms. Change has reshaped me, and it's a journey worth sharing. The room vibrated with energy, attentive faces leaning forward as they anticipated the sharing of stories. As the night unfolded, participants spoke of internal obstacles, of fear, of future aspirations forming amidst the wreckage of earlier ambitions. Jack led them with care, guiding their reflections, encouraging them to embrace the discomfort of change rather than shy away from it. The conversations carried an urgency that felt transformative, like coals ignited to flame. Attendees began to vocalize not only their struggles, but also the hopes that had been buried beneath the weight of fear. Jack listened intently, witnessing the catharsis blooming within his makeshift community, marveling at the power of resilience shared in a space cultivated with trust. At the end of the night, one participant named Ella approached him, teary-eyed yet hopeful. "You've given us a place to speak our truths," she said, her voice unwavering. "I never would have spoken about my struggles if it hadn't been for what you shared first." Jack felt the warmth settle in his chest, a reaffirmation of purpose that was long overdue. "Thank you for sharing that with me, Ella. It's stories like yours that remind me why this work is so important." He knew that recognition was a vital component of healing. Acknowledging their collective journey transformed guilt into strength. As others gathered for closing remarks, Jack stepped outside to catch the cool night air. The stars flickered like distant opportunities, each one a reminder that life thrived in the expanse of the unknown. Alongside them, he felt the weight of his personal evolution, the struggles faced, and the lessons embraced. In that moment, finally aware of his growth, Jack realized he wasn't merely a man rekindling an old flame. He had become a beacon of guidance for others. He was not defined by job titles or past heartbreaks, but was, instead, a testament to the power of resilience and the potential of shared experiences. The journey had swept him from darkness to a firm conviction in his ability to create not only change in himself, but for those around him. Jack took a deep breath, feeling solid confidence coursing through him. What remained was an understanding that personal achievement wasn't just building oneself anew, but stood firmly rooted in the relationships fostered through empathy, shared struggles, and transformative change. As the gatherings continued to ripple outward and grow into a powerful force for change, Jack's heart swelled with pride. He had reclaimed his identity, intertwined it with the essence of community, and transformed an old narrative of despair into a new story steeped in purpose and gratitude. He knew then that the work was far from over. There were still shadows to explore, histories to weave, and lives to touch. Jack gazed up at the night sky, a sense of urgency tinged with satisfaction imbuing him. He was ready to drive that urgency and inspiration forward. Now was the time for action, creating change that echoed into the lived experience of others. True fulfillment came from the forge of vulnerability where true connections blossomed. As he stepped back into the gathering, the embers of hope glowing brighter than ever, Jack felt a newfound power spark within him. Each story told and each life touched was proof that the urgency to connect is what truly mattered. Today, embrace the transformative nature of your own stories, find strength in vulnerability, and reach for the connections that will hasten your growth. Recognize that every step you take in sharing and listening strengthens the bridge toward understanding and fulfillment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now because this is the moment to show your support for genuine tales of overcoming hardship. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.